The silent path to inner peace. Building discipline through quietness, not through fear. Introduction. You hate yourself every time you break. You know that feeling, don't you? The alarm goes off at 6. You told yourself last night that tomorrow would be different, that this time you'd show up for yourself, that this time you'd finally stick to the plan. But your body feels heavy. Your mind starts bargaining. Just 10 more minutes. Just today. You can start tomorrow. And you give in. Again. Later, when you're sitting at your desk or standing in front of the mirror, that voice shows up. The one that sounds like disappointment. The one that whispers, you're not strong enough. You're not disciplined enough. You don't have what it takes. So you try harder. You yell at yourself louder. You promise yourself you'll be stricter, tougher, more ruthless with your own weakness. You turn your life into a war. You versus you. And here's the truth nobody wants to hear. That war is destroying you. Most people build discipline the same way. Through fear. Through shame. Through self-punishment. They wake up every day and force themselves forward, white-knuckling their way through goals they said mattered. They believe that if they're just hard enough on themselves, mean enough, relentless enough, they'll finally break through. And maybe it works. For a week. For a month if they're lucky, but then the cracks show. The exhaustion sets in. The self-hatred grows. And one morning, they wake up and realize they can't do it anymore. So they quit. Not because they're weak, but because they built their discipline on a foundation that was always designed to crumble. Here's what they don't tell you. Discipline built on fear doesn't last. Discipline built on self-hate doesn't build strength. It builds resentment. It builds burnout. It builds a life where every choice feels like punishment and every day feels like survival. But there's another way. A way that doesn't require you to go to war with yourself. A way that doesn't demand you scream at your reflection or collapse under the weight of your own expectations. A way that's quiet, steady, unshakable. It's called the silent path to inner peace. And it's about building discipline through something most people never consider. Calm. Not control, not force. Calm. Real discipline doesn't scream. It breathes. Real discipline doesn't break you. It builds you. Real discipline doesn't come from hating who you are. It comes from respecting who you're becoming. And that discipline, the kind that lasts, the kind that doesn't burn out after the first hard week, that discipline is built in silence, in stillness, in a place inside you that fear can't touch. This book is not about pushing harder. It's about moving smarter. It's not about forcing yourself to be better. It's about leading yourself with kindness and strength. It's not about 30-day challenges or 1% improvements. It's about understanding how discipline really works, how it grows, how it becomes part of who you are, not just something you do when you're motivated. You're going to learn how silence protects your energy, how calmness creates consistency, how the quietest people often carry the deepest strength. You're going to see why talking about your goals drains them, why self-control doesn't require self-hate, and why the secret to lasting discipline isn't in your willpower, it's in your peace. This isn't theory. This is a system, a path. One that's been walked by the people who don't burn out, the people who don't quit halfway, the people who build lives they're proud of without destroying themselves in the process. And now it's your turn to walk it. You don't need to be tougher on yourself. You need to be wiser with yourself. You don't need to force change. You need to create the conditions where change becomes natural. You don't need to fight your way to discipline. You need to find your way to it. Through the one thing most people overlook. inner peace. So if you're tired of the cycle, tired of starting over, tired of hating yourself every time you slip, this is your way forward. Not louder, quieter, not harder, calmer, not through fear, through peace. Welcome to the Silent Path. Chapter 1. What real discipline is and why you've been doing it wrong. Every morning starts the same way for most people who try to build discipline. The alarm goes off, and before your eyes are fully open, your inner voice is already screaming at you. Get up. Don't be lazy. You said you'd change. Why are you still in bed? You're pathetic. This is the voice you've been taught to believe is discipline. The drill sergeant inside your head that pushes you through shame and punishment until you finally drag yourself out of bed, already exhausted from the war you're waging against yourself. This isn't discipline. This is violence dressed up as productivity, and it's destroying you from the inside out. You can feel it in the way your chest tightens when you think about your goals, the way your shoulders carry tension even when you're trying to relax, the way you dread the very changes you claim you want because somewhere deep down, you know that pursuing them means another round of self-inflicted brutality. You've been conditioned to believe that discipline requires force, that real change only happens when you hate yourself enough to move, that growth is supposed to hurt in a way that makes you question whether you're strong enough to continue. This belief has turned your life into a battlefield where you're fighting the only person who can never truly be defeated without destroying yourself in the process. Every morning becomes a declaration of war. Every choice becomes ammunition for self-criticism. And every slip becomes evidence that you were always too weak to succeed. The neuroscience tells a different story. When you operate from a state of chronic stress and self-hatred, your brain releases cortisol and adrenaline continuously, flooding your system with chemicals designed for short bursts of survival response, not sustained growth. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and self-control, actually becomes less effective under this constant assault. You're literally making it harder to maintain discipline by using shame as your primary motivator. The very approach you thought would make you stronger is chemically weakening your capacity for the sustained effort that real change requires. Real discipline doesn't shout. It doesn't berate. It doesn't punish. Real discipline is the quiet decision to honor a commitment you made to yourself, not because you'll hate yourself if you don't, but because you respect yourself enough to follow through. It's the difference between dragging yourself to the gym while mentally listing all your failures and walking to the gym with calm determination because you decided this matters to you. One approach burns through your reserves and leaves you depleted within days. The other builds sustainable momentum that can last for years. Think about how you treat someone you genuinely care about when they're struggling. You don't scream at them that they're worthless. You don't berate them for their mistakes. You encourage them. You remind them of their strength. You help them find a path forward that doesn't require them to hate themselves into action. Why would the person you need to maintain discipline with for your entire life, yourself, deserve any less compassion than you'd offer to someone you've known for 5 minutes? The people who maintain discipline over decades, who build lives of genuine achievement without burning out, have discovered something that runs counter to everything you've been taught. They've learned that discipline is an act of self-respect, not self-punishment. It's the natural expression of someone who values their future enough to make choices that serve it, even when those choices require short-term discomfort. When discipline comes from respect rather than fear, it doesn't deplete your energy. It generates it because you're no longer spending half your mental resources fighting against yourself. This doesn't mean discipline is always comfortable or that growth doesn't require sacrifice. It means the foundation matters. When you build discipline on a bedrock of self-hatred, every structure you create will eventually crumble under the weight of your own hostility toward yourself. When you build it on respect, clarity, and quiet determination, you create something that can withstand the inevitable challenges and setbacks without requiring you to destroy yourself in the process. The shift begins with recognizing that every time you've forced yourself to do something through shame and fear, you've been training your nervous system to associate your goals with threat, making it progressively harder to maintain momentum. Real discipline retrains that response, teaching your system that growth is safe. That effort can come from a place of calm rather than panic. That you can want something better for yourself without hating what you are right now. You've been fighting yourself for so long that peace might feel unfamiliar at first. But peace is where sustainable discipline lives. Not in the screaming, not in the shame, not in the endless internal warfare, but in the quiet space where you can look at what needs to be done and simply do it because you decided it matters. That's what real discipline looks like. And it's been available to you all along, hidden beneath the noise of a war you never needed to fight. Chapter 2. Silence, the first tool of discipline. You've told everyone about your goals. You've announced your plans. You've shared your vision with friends, family, co-workers, anyone who would listen. And it felt good, didn't it? For a moment, you felt productive, accomplished, like you were already making progress just by talking about it. But then something strange happened. The motivation faded. The urgency disappeared. The fire that burned so bright when you first decided to change your life started to flicker and dim. And you couldn't understand why telling people about your goals made them feel less important instead of more. What you experienced wasn't a coincidence. It's a psychological phenomenon that has derailed more dreams than failure ever could. Because when you announce your intentions before you've done the work, your brain receives a premature reward. You get the dopamine hit of achievement without actually achieving anything. Your mind registers the positive feedback, the encouragement, the validation, and it mistakes that social reward for actual progress. The result is that you've satisfied the craving for recognition without building anything real. And now the drive to follow through has weakened because your brain believes you've already succeeded. Silence protects your discipline in ways that most people never understand. When you keep your goals private, when you work without announcing every step, when you build without broadcasting, you preserve the energy that would otherwise be lost to explanation, defense, and performance. That energy becomes fuel for actual work. The hours you would have spent crafting social media posts about your journey become hours spent actually walking the path. The mental space you would have used justifying your choices to skeptics becomes space for focus, planning, and execution. Think about the people who transform their lives dramatically. The ones who show up one day completely different from who they were 6 months ago. They didn't post daily updates. They didn't seek constant validation. They disappeared into their work. They went silent, not because they were hiding, but because they were building. And when they finally emerged, their results spoke so loudly that no announcement was necessary. The transformation was undeniable because it was real. Because every ounce of energy went into the work instead of into talking about the work. Silence also shields your discipline from something even more destructive than premature celebration: doubt. The moment you share your plans, you open them up to other people's fears disguised as concern. They'll tell you it's too risky. They'll remind you of the obstacles. They'll project their own limitations onto your vision. And unless you have an unshakable foundation, that doubt will seep in. You'll start second-guessing yourself. You'll begin to wonder if maybe they're right. You'll find yourself defending your dream when you should be building it. And every minute spent in defense is a minute stolen from creation. The truth that nobody wants to tell you is that most people don't want to see you change dramatically because your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation. Your discipline becomes a mirror that reflects their lack of it. Your silence becomes threatening because it suggests focus they don't have. Your transformation becomes uncomfortable because it proves that change is possible, which means they can no longer hide behind excuses. This doesn't make them bad people. It makes them human. But it does mean that sharing your journey with everyone is a liability, not an asset. Working in silence doesn't mean you can never tell anyone anything. It means you're selective about who gets access to your vision. It means you protect your goals like you protect anything valuable, by limiting exposure to people who haven't earned the right to speak into your life. It means you understand that not everyone deserves to know what you're building, especially not in the vulnerable early stages when one dismissive comment could plant a seed of doubt that grows into full retreat. When you embrace silence as your first tool of discipline, something powerful begins to happen. Your relationship with your goals becomes private, sacred, personal. You stop needing external validation to keep going. You stop checking for likes and comments to measure whether your effort matters. You develop an internal compass that guides you based on your own progress, your own standards, your own vision. That independence is where real strength lives. That self-sufficiency is what separates people who maintain discipline for a lifetime from people who flame out after a few inspired weeks. Silence creates a unique kind of pressure that actually helps discipline rather than hindering it. When nobody knows what you're working on, the only person you can disappoint is yourself. That might sound like less accountability, but it's actually more. External accountability is fragile because it depends on other people caring. Internal accountability is permanent because it depends on you respecting yourself enough to follow through. When your word to yourself becomes more important than your image to others, you've unlocked a level of discipline that can't be shaken by changing opinions or fading support. The most disciplined people you'll ever meet aren't the loudest. They're the quietest. They don't need to tell you they're working because their results eventually do all the talking. They understand that every announcement is energy leaked, every explanation is focus diverted, every update is an invitation for interference. So they guard their work like it's sacred because it is. They protect their discipline with silence because they know that words are cheap and action is expensive, and they'd rather spend their currency on building than on broadcasting. Right now, someone is working in complete silence on something that will change their life. They're not posting about it. They're not talking about it at parties. They're not seeking applause for effort. They're just showing up every day, doing the work, trusting that the results will reveal themselves when the time is right. That person could be you. The question is whether you're willing to trade the temporary satisfaction of announcement for the permanent power of achievement. Whether you're ready to let silence become your first tool of discipline. Because once you understand that talking about your goals weakens them while working on them in silence strengthens them, you'll never waste energy on announcements again. You'll close your mouth, open your calendar, and get to work. Chapter 3. Calmness, the source of consistency. You've tried before, haven't you? You've set goals, started new habits, promised yourself this time would be different. And for a while, maybe days or even weeks, you stayed consistent. You showed up. You did the work. You felt the momentum building. But then something happened. A stressful day at work, an unexpected crisis, a sleepless night. And suddenly, the consistency that felt so solid began to crumble. Before you knew it, you were back to old patterns. wondering why you couldn't maintain what you started, assuming the problem was your willpower or your commitment. But the problem wasn't your willpower. It was the foundation you were building on. You were trying to create consistency through force, through determination, through pushing yourself harder when what you actually needed was calm. Most people don't understand the relationship between calmness and consistency. They see discipline as something you maintain through gritted teeth and constant effort, something that requires you to override your natural state with sheer determination. But this approach treats consistency like a war you wage against yourself every day. And wars are exhausting. They deplete your resources. They can't be sustained indefinitely. Eventually, the person who's trying to force consistency through sheer willpower runs out of energy, and everything collapses. Real consistency, the kind that lasts years instead of weeks, doesn't come from force. It comes from calm. When your nervous system is regulated, when your internal state is peaceful, when you're not constantly fighting against stress and anxiety and fear, consistency becomes natural. You don't have to force yourself to show up, because showing up doesn't cost you the same emotional energy it costs someone who's operating from chaos. Think about how you function when you're stressed versus when you're calm. When stress dominates your system, everything becomes harder. Simple decisions feel overwhelming. Small tasks require enormous effort. Your brain is so busy managing the stress response that it has no bandwidth left for sustained effort toward long-term goals. This is why people who are chronically stressed rarely maintain consistent habits. Not because they lack discipline, but because their nervous system is working overtime just to keep them functioning, leaving nothing left over for the patient. Steady work that consistency requires. Calmness creates the internal conditions where consistency can thrive. When you're operating from a calm baseline, you have access to your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and impulse control. You can see your commitments clearly. You can prioritize effectively. You can maintain your focus on what matters without being constantly derailed by emotional reactivity. This is why the calmest people often seem to accomplish the most, not because they're working harder, but because their internal state allows them to work more consistently without the constant starts and stops that characterize most people's efforts. Building consistency through calmness means learning to regulate your nervous system before expecting yourself to maintain discipline. It means understanding that when you wake up anxious, trying to force yourself through your morning routine is fighting an uphill battle. Your body is already in survival mode, and discipline requires the parts of your brain that survival mode shuts down. Instead of forcing harder, you need to calm first. A few minutes of deep breathing, a brief walk, some simple stretching. These aren't distractions from your goals. They're the foundation that makes pursuing your goals sustainable. The rhythm of calm consistency is completely different from the frenetic energy of forced discipline. Forced discipline says you must push harder, go faster, never slow down. Calm consistency says you must find your sustainable pace, maintain your center, and trust that steady progress compounds into extraordinary results. Forced discipline burns bright and fast. Calm consistency burns steady and long. Which would you rather build your life on? One of the most powerful shifts you can make is understanding that maintaining calmness is not separate from pursuing your goals. It's not something extra you have to add to your already busy life. Maintaining calmness is what makes pursuing your goals sustainable. When you prioritize practices that keep you calm, morning meditation, regular exercise, adequate sleep, time in nature, you're not taking time away from your productivity. You're creating the internal conditions that allow productivity to flow naturally rather than being forced. The people who maintain discipline for decades rather than days are operating from a completely different internal state than those who constantly start and stop. They've learned that calmness isn't a luxury you indulge in when everything else is handled. It's the foundation everything else is built on. They understand that when they protect their peace, they protect their capacity for consistent action. They know that the days they spend maintaining calmness aren't wasted days. They're the days that make all the other days possible. Your consistency will never exceed your capacity for calm. If you want to maintain discipline when life gets challenging, you need to build a nervous system that can handle challenge without defaulting to chaos. If you want to show up for yourself every day, you need an internal state where showing up doesn't require heroic effort. If you want your discipline to be unshakable, you need to build it on the bedrock of inner peace. Calmness isn't the reward you get after you've achieved consistency. It's the source from which consistency flows. Build your calm, and your consistency will follow naturally. This is the path that doesn't burn you out. This is the discipline that lasts. Chapter 4. Daily Discipline, Actions that Build Your Life. Your life is not built in one dramatic moment of transformation. It's built in the quiet moments that nobody sees, in the daily actions you repeat so consistently that they stop feeling like effort and start feeling like identity. The morning you make your bed when you'd rather leave it unmade. The afternoon you choose the difficult work over the easy distraction. The evening you close your day with intention instead of collapsing into mindless escape. These small decisions, stacked day after day, create the foundation of a disciplined life. Most people want discipline to feel heroic, but real discipline is boring. It's waking up at the same time every morning. Not because it's exciting, but because you decided it matters. It's following through on commitments to yourself when nobody would know if you broke them. It's doing the next right thing, even when the previous 10 things didn't produce visible results. This unglamorous consistency is what separates people who maintain discipline for decades from those who flame out after a few inspired weeks. The reason daily discipline matters more than occasional intensity is simple. Your brain learns through repetition, not through drama. When you perform an action once with tremendous effort, your brain registers it as an anomaly, something you did under special circumstances that required exceptional willpower. But when you perform that same action at the same time for several weeks, your brain begins to automate it, creating neural pathways that make the behavior easier each time you repeat it. Eventually, the action requires less conscious effort because it's become part of your operating system. Think about how you function in the morning. You probably don't debate whether to brush your teeth. You don't need motivation to do it. You don't require an inspiring speech about dental hygiene. You simply do it because somewhere in your past, through repeated action, it became automatic. That's the power of daily discipline, the ability to transform conscious effort into unconscious execution, freeing up your willpower for the decisions that still require it. Building daily discipline doesn't require you to overhaul your entire life overnight. That approach, while dramatic, typically fails because it demands too much change too quickly for your nervous system to integrate. Instead, start with what researchers call a keystone habit, one foundational action that makes other positive behaviors easier. For many people, this is movement. A morning walk or brief exercise session doesn't just benefit your body. It regulates your nervous system, sharpens your focus, and creates momentum that carries into the rest of your day. When you start your day having already done something difficult, everything else feels more manageable. The architecture of a disciplined day typically includes 3 anchor points: morning, midday, and evening. Your morning routine establishes your baseline state. Are you starting the day reactive, immediately checking your phone and letting other people's priorities flood your attention? Or are you starting intentional, taking even 10 minutes to center yourself, review your goals, and decide how you want to show up? This distinction shapes everything that follows. A reactive morning creates a reactive day. An intentional morning creates space for disciplined choices. Your midday anchor keeps you from drifting. It's easy to start strong and fade by afternoon, especially when decision fatigue sets in and your willpower depletes. This is when having a predetermined midday reset becomes critical. It might be a brief walk, a structured lunch break where you step away from work, or simply 5 minutes of conscious breathing. The specific practice matters less than the consistency. What you're doing is training yourself to maintain discipline across the full arc of the day, not just in the motivated morning hours. Your evening anchor closes the loop. How you end your day determines how you'll start tomorrow. If you collapse into mindless scrolling until you fall asleep with your phone in your hand, you're setting yourself up for a rough morning. If you take 30 minutes to prepare for tomorrow, reviewing what you accomplished, identifying what needs attention, and creating a clear plan for the next day, you wake up with direction instead of confusion. This simple practice transforms your relationship with time because you're no longer starting each day figuring out what to do. You're starting each day executing what you already decided. Daily discipline also lives in the decisions that seem too small to matter. Whether you leave dishes in the sink or wash them immediately. Whether you put your clothes away or leave them on the floor. Whether you keep your commitments to yourself or treat them as optional. These micro-decisions don't feel significant in isolation, but they compound. Each time you do the disciplined thing in a small moment, you're casting a vote for the identity of someone who maintains standards. Each time you let it slide, you're reinforcing the identity of someone whose discipline is negotiable. The goal is not perfection. You will have days when you miss your routine, when circumstances disrupt your plans, when you fall short of your own standards. This is not failure. This is being human. What matters is how quickly you return to your baseline. Disciplined people don't beat themselves up for one missed day. They simply resume their routine the next day without drama, without extended guilt, without using one slip as justification for abandoning the entire structure. Your daily actions are writing your future in real time. Not the actions you take once when you feel inspired, but the ones you repeat when you feel nothing at all. That's where your life is actually built. In the boring, unglamorous, repeated choices that nobody sees but you. And every single one of those choices is either moving you toward the person you want to become or keeping you exactly where you are. Chapter 5. Discipline in Moments of Weakness. How not to break. The alarm goes off at 6. Yesterday, you were certain you'd wake up and run. Yesterday, your commitment felt unbreakable. But this morning, your bed feels like sanctuary. The air outside your blankets feels impossibly cold. And every fiber of your being is negotiating with the promise you made to yourself. This is the moment where discipline lives or dies. Not in the planning, not in the declaration of intent, but in the split second when you don't want to do what you said you'd do. Everyone experiences moments of weakness. The difference between people who maintain discipline long-term and those who constantly restart is not that one group never feels weak. It's that they've learned specific techniques for navigating weakness without breaking their commitments. They understand that the feeling of not wanting to do something is completely normal and temporary. And they have protocols for moving through that feeling rather than being controlled by it. The 10-minute rule transforms overwhelming tasks into manageable commitments. When you're facing something you genuinely don't want to do, Tell yourself you only have to do it for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you can stop if you want. What happens almost every time is that once you've started, the resistance dissolves and continuing becomes easier than it seemed before you began. The hardest part of any disciplined action is starting, not continuing. Your brain creates enormous resistance to beginning because it's trying to protect you from perceived discomfort. But once you're actually engaged in the activity, the resistance fades and you often find yourself willing to continue well beyond those initial 10 minutes. The pause and breathe technique interrupts the automatic pattern of giving in to weakness. When you feel yourself about to break a commitment, stop completely for 30 seconds and take 3 deep breaths. This activates your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making, giving you access to your values and long-term thinking rather than just immediate comfort. In that pause, ask yourself one question. Which version of myself do I want to strengthen right now? The one who keeps promises or the one who breaks them? This isn't about shame or guilt. It's about recognizing that every moment of choice is also a moment of identity creation. You're always casting votes for the type of person you're becoming. Understanding the discipline curve changes how you experience moments of weakness. Resistance is always highest at the beginning of any disciplined action and decreases rapidly once you start. If you graph the difficulty of maintaining discipline over time, it would look like a steep curve that flattens quickly. The first 5 minutes of your workout feel terrible. Then your body adjusts. The first paragraph of writing feels impossible. Then the words start flowing. The first few minutes of meditation feel restless. Then your mind begins to settle. When you understand this pattern, you can tell yourself that what you're feeling right now is temporary, predictable, and will pass quickly if you just begin. The minimum viable action concept ensures you maintain consistency even when you genuinely don't have the energy for your full commitment. On days when you're exhausted, sick, or overwhelmed, give yourself permission to do the absolute minimum version of your discipline. If you normally run 5 miles, walk 1 mile. If you normally write for an hour, write for 10 minutes. If you normally do a full workout, do 5 push-ups and 5 squats. The goal on weekdays isn't optimal performance. It's maintaining the identity of someone who shows up regardless of circumstances. This prevents the all-or-nothing thinking that causes many people to abandon discipline entirely when they can't perform at their usual level. Environmental pre-commitment removes the need for willpower in moments of weakness by making the disciplined choice the path of least resistance. If you struggle with getting to the gym in the morning, sleep in your workout clothes. If you struggle with eating well, don't keep junk food in your house. If you struggle with wasting time on your phone, put it in another room when you need to focus. You're not trying to develop unlimited willpower, you're trying to design your environment so that discipline requires less willpower. The identity statement technique connects your moment of weakness to your larger sense of self. When you're tempted to break discipline, say to yourself, I am someone who keeps commitments to myself. Or, I am someone who chooses long-term over short-term. Or whatever identity statement reflects who you're working to become. This shifts your focus from what you feel like doing to who you are. And identity is far more powerful than temporary feelings. When keeping your commitment becomes an expression of your identity rather than just a task you're trying to complete, the decision becomes clearer. The future self-visualization helps you see beyond the present moment of discomfort. When you don't want to maintain your discipline, take 30 seconds to imagine yourself 8 hours from now. If you break your commitment, how will you feel? Disappointed? Frustrated with yourself? Full of regret? Now imagine yourself 8 hours from now if you keep your commitment despite not feeling like it. Proud? Stronger? More confident in your ability to maintain discipline? This simple exercise often provides enough motivation to push through temporary weakness because you're connecting the present moment to future consequences. Most importantly, understand that weakness is not failure. Feeling weak, tired, unmotivated, or resistant is completely human and doesn't mean your discipline is failing. What matters is what you do with those feelings. People who maintain long-term discipline don't feel more motivated than everyone else. They've simply learned to act regardless of how they feel. They've developed the skill of separating emotion from action, understanding that motivation is not a prerequisite for discipline. Discipline is what you do precisely when you don't feel motivated. And every time you act despite weakness, you build evidence that your commitment is stronger than your feelings. Chapter 6. Discipline without motivation. Building systems that work always. Motivation is beautiful when it shows up, filling you with energy and clarity about where you want to go, making the hard work feel almost effortless. But motivation is also unreliable. It comes and goes like weather, strong one day and absent the next, leaving you staring at your goals, wondering where the fire went. If you build your discipline on motivation alone, you'll find yourself constantly starting over, riding waves of enthusiasm that crash into shores of apathy, never quite making it past the shallow waters into the deep work that transforms lives. The people who achieve lasting results don't have more motivation than everyone else. They've simply stopped depending on it. They've built systems that function regardless of how they feel, structures that carry them forward on the days when motivation is silent and willpower feels depleted. These systems don't require you to feel inspired. They only require that you designed them well enough to make the right choice easier than the wrong one. A system is not motivation. A system is architecture. It's the way you structure your environment, your schedule, your default behaviors, so that discipline becomes automatic, rather than something you have to manufacture fresh every morning. Think about how you already operate on autopilot in certain areas of your life. You don't debate whether to brush your teeth. You don't need a motivational speech to lock your door when you leave home. These behaviors happen because they've been systematized, integrated into your routine so deeply that they require almost no conscious effort. The goal is to do the same thing with discipline. You want to reach a point where the actions that build your life don't require constant emotional labor, where showing up for your goals feels as natural as any other part of your day, not because you've become superhuman, but because you've become systematic. This happens through environmental design, removing friction from desired behaviors while adding friction to undesired ones. If you want to work out consistently, put your gym clothes next to your bed so they're the first thing you see in the morning. If you want to read more, place books in every room and keep your phone in a drawer. If you want to eat better, prepare meals in advance so that when hunger hits, the healthy choice is the convenient choice. You're not changing your willpower. You're changing the default path, making discipline the easier option rather than the harder one. Systems also include triggers and routines that automate decision-making. Instead of asking yourself each day whether you'll work on your goals, create a non-negotiable time block that belongs to that work. The decision is already made. You're not choosing whether to show up. You're only choosing how you'll use the time that's already allocated. This removes the daily negotiation that drains willpower. The internal debate about whether today is the day you'll follow through. When the system is in place, the answer is always yes, because the structure demands it. Accountability mechanisms strengthen systems when personal willpower wavers. This doesn't mean you need someone watching over you constantly. It means building checkpoints where you track progress, review results, and adjust course. A simple spreadsheet where you mark completed tasks. A weekly review where you assess what worked and what didn't. A commitment to never miss twice, recognizing that one slip doesn't break the system, but 2 consecutive slips can start a pattern of decay. These mechanisms create feedback loops that keep you honest, even when no one else is paying attention. The power of systems reveals itself most clearly during difficult periods. When life throws chaos at you, when stress overwhelms your capacity for conscious decision-making, when emotional exhaustion makes every choice feel heavy, systems hold the line. You don't have to think. You don't have to decide. You simply follow the structure you built during calmer times, trusting that it was designed to carry you through exactly these moments. The system becomes your external discipline when your internal discipline falters. This doesn't mean systems eliminate discomfort. The work is still hard. The effort is still required. But systems remove the additional burden of having to constantly convince yourself to do what you already know needs doing. They reduce discipline from a daily battle into a daily rhythm, from something you force into something you follow. And in that shift, sustainability is born because you can't white-knuckle your way through life forever, but you can build structures that make forward motion natural. Building effective systems requires honesty about your patterns. Where do you consistently fail? What time of day is your willpower lowest? What triggers cause you to abandon your commitments? Once you understand your weak points, you can design around them. If evenings are when you collapse into distraction, front-load your important work into mornings. If hunger makes you grab whatever's closest, keep only healthy options accessible. Systems succeed not by demanding you become someone you're not, but by working with who you actually are, while gently guiding you toward who you want to become. The most successful people aren't those with the most motivation. They're those with the best systems. They've stopped relying on feelings to dictate their actions. They've built lives where discipline is embedded in structure, where consistency is the natural output of intelligent design. And once you understand this principle, you stop chasing inspiration and start building infrastructure. You stop waiting to feel ready and start creating conditions where readiness isn't required. You stop hoping you'll stay disciplined and start ensuring you will through the architecture of your daily life. That's where real power lives. Not in the surge of motivation that fades by afternoon, but in the quiet system that keeps working whether you're inspired or exhausted, excited or indifferent, certain or doubtful. Build systems that work always, and you'll discover that discipline isn't something you need to find. It's something you create through the careful construction of a life designed to make the right choices inevitable. Chapter 7. Discipline Under Pressure. When everything feels like it's falling apart, there's a moment in every disciplined life when everything you've built feels like it's crumbling. The job you worked hard to secure suddenly becomes unstable. The relationship you invested years nurturing hits a crisis point. The health you took for granted sends warning signals that can't be ignored. These are the moments when your discipline gets tested not by boredom or routine, but by genuine chaos. When the ground beneath your feet shifts and you have to decide whether to maintain your commitments or abandon them in favor of pure survival mode. Most people fail here. They tell themselves that maintaining discipline during crisis is unrealistic, that they need to just get through this before they can return to their routines, that their habits and systems are luxuries for calm times but unnecessary during storms. This thinking is exactly backwards. Discipline during crisis isn't optional. It's essential. It's the difference between navigating difficulty with some level of control and being completely overwhelmed by circumstances. When life hits you with genuine challenges that demand immediate attention and consume massive amounts of energy, Your disciplined practices become the anchor that keeps you from drifting into complete chaos. The person who maintains their morning routine during a crisis has at least 1 hour of their day that feels stable and familiar. The person who continues their evening review can process what's happening rather than just reacting to it. The person who protects their sleep schedule maintains the cognitive function needed to make good decisions when everything feels urgent. This doesn't mean your discipline looks the same during crisis as it does during normal times. Rigid adherence to your full routine when circumstances genuinely require flexibility is just another form of chaos. The art is knowing which elements of your discipline are non-negotiable foundations that must be maintained regardless of circumstances, and which elements can be temporarily modified or reduced to accommodate genuine emergency needs. Your baseline practices, the ones that regulate your nervous system and maintain basic functionality, should be protected almost regardless of what else is falling apart. This typically includes adequate sleep, basic nutrition, some form of movement, and a few minutes of mental centering. These aren't the things you do after you handle the crisis. These are the things that enable you to handle the crisis effectively. When you sacrifice sleep to worry, skip meals because you're too stressed to eat, stop moving because you're too busy, and abandon all mental regulation practices, you're not freeing up resources for the crisis. You're guaranteeing that you'll handle it poorly. The minimum viable version of your discipline becomes crucial during high-pressure periods. If you normally run 5 miles, run 1 mile or take a brisk walk. If you normally meditate for 20 minutes, meditate for 3 minutes, or simply take 10 conscious breaths. If you normally write 3 pages in your journal, write 3 sentences. The goal during crisis isn't optimal performance of your routines. It's maintaining the thread of consistency that will allow you to return to your full practice when circumstances stabilize. Crisis also reveals whether your discipline has been built on motivation or systems. Motivation disappears instantly when genuine difficulty arrives. The person whose discipline depends on feeling inspired, having energy, or seeing immediate results will abandon their practices the moment real pressure hits. But the person whose discipline is embedded in systems, in environmental design, in automatic routines that don't require constant decision-making, will find that their practices continue almost on autopilot even when they feel overwhelmed. One of the most powerful discipline practices during crisis is strategic tunnel vision, the ability to narrow your focus to what actually requires attention right now, while consciously releasing worry about everything else. When multiple areas of your life are demanding attention simultaneously, your instinct is to try to address all of them at once, resulting in scattered energy and poor results across the board. Instead, identify the 1 or 2 things that genuinely must be handled immediately. Give them your full attention, and deliberately choose to let everything else wait without guilt or anxiety. This requires brutal honesty about what's truly urgent versus what merely feels urgent. Most things that seem like they must be addressed immediately can actually wait hours, days, or even weeks without significant consequences. But when you're in crisis mode, everything feels equally urgent, and your decision-making becomes reactive rather than strategic. The discipline of differentiating between genuine urgency and anxiety-driven urgency is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. Maintaining discipline during crisis also means being ruthlessly protective of your decision-making capacity. Every decision you make depletes a finite resource of mental energy, and during high-pressure periods, you're making far more decisions than normal. This means you need to be even more strategic about eliminating unnecessary decisions. Eat the same breakfast every day. Wear similar outfits without thinking. Follow your predetermined schedule without debate. These aren't signs of rigid thinking. They're strategies for preserving cognitive resources for the decisions that actually matter. The people who maintain their discipline during the hardest periods of their lives aren't superhuman. They're people who understand that discipline isn't about perfection. It's about maintaining connection to the practices and identities that keep you functional when everything around you is unstable. They know that the morning you least want to follow your routine is probably the morning you most need it. They understand that maintaining even a minimal version of their discipline during crisis creates a bridge back to normal functioning when the crisis passes. What you learn about yourself during crisis becomes the foundation for unshakable discipline in all circumstances. When you discover that you can maintain your core practices even during genuinely difficult times, you develop a confidence that transforms your relationship with discipline entirely. You stop seeing it as something you do when life is easy and start seeing it as the tool that makes you capable of handling whatever life presents. That shift in understanding is what separates temporary discipline from permanent transformation. Chapter 8. The Discipline of Decades. Building a Life that Lasts. You can sprint through a day. You can hustle through a month. You can push hard through a year. But the life you want, the one built on genuine achievement, meaningful relationships, and deep fulfillment, that life isn't built in short bursts of intensity. It's built through decades of steady discipline, through years of showing up when nobody's watching, through the unglamorous work of maintaining standards long after the initial excitement has faded into routine. Most people approach discipline like it's a temporary project, something they'll do until they reach a specific goal, after which they can relax and return to their old ways. This is why most transformations are temporary. They're treating discipline as a means to an end, rather than understanding that for those who build extraordinary lives, discipline is the end. It becomes the way they exist in the world, not something they do occasionally when they want specific results. The discipline of decades requires a fundamentally different mindset than the discipline of days. When you're thinking in terms of decades, you can't rely on willpower alone. You can't white-knuckle your way through 30 years. You have to build something sustainable, something that doesn't burn you out, something that becomes so integrated into who you are that maintaining it requires less effort than abandoning it would. This means your discipline must be built on values rather than goals. Goals change. You achieve them, or circumstances shift, or you realize they weren't what you actually wanted. But values remain constant. When your discipline is rooted in values like integrity, growth, contribution, and excellence, it doesn't matter whether you've achieved the specific goal you set 5 years ago. You're still showing up the same way because that's who you are, not just what you're trying to accomplish. Think about the people you admire who've maintained excellence over decades. The writers who've published quality work for 40 years. The business leaders who've built enduring companies. The artists who've continued creating meaningful work into their later years. The athletes who stayed relevant far longer than their peers. They're not operating on motivation. They've transcended that entirely. They've built lives where discipline is woven into their daily existence so completely that it's become effortless in a way that looks like magic to outside observers, but is actually the result of decades of practice. Building discipline that lasts decades requires accepting that you will change dramatically over that time. The person you are at 25 is not the person you'll be at 45 or 65. Your circumstances will change. Your priorities will shift. Your body will age. Your relationships will evolve. The discipline that lasts is the discipline that's flexible enough to adapt to these changes while maintaining its core essence. This is why the best disciplined people aren't rigid. They're adaptive. They don't abandon their standards when life changes, but they're willing to adjust how they maintain those standards. The runner who develops knee problems doesn't abandon fitness. They find a different form of movement. The writer whose eyesight weakens doesn't stop creating. They adapt their process. The parent whose children grow up doesn't lose their sense of purpose. They redirect their energy. The discipline of decades also requires regular renewal. You can't maintain the same level of intensity for 30 years without periodically stepping back to reassess, to reconnect with why these practices matter, to eliminate what's no longer serving you and reinforce what is. This is different from quitting or losing discipline. It's strategic maintenance, the way you'd service a vehicle you plan to drive for decades rather than running it into the ground. Building for decades means accepting seasons of different intensity. There will be years when you're pushing hard toward specific achievements. There will be years when you're maintaining and consolidating. There will be years when you're recovering or rebuilding after setbacks. All of this is normal. The discipline of decades doesn't mean maintaining the same pace forever. It means never abandoning your core commitments, regardless of the season you're in. The most important aspect of decade-level discipline is that it changes what's available to you over time in ways that short-term discipline never can. Skills compound. Relationships deepen. Reputation solidifies. Opportunities that weren't possible in year 2 become available in year 20. The writer who's been publishing consistently for 15 years gets opportunities that would never come to someone talented who's been working for 2 years. The professional who's maintained excellence for decades is trusted in ways that younger, equally skilled people aren't. This compounding effect is why the discipline of decades is worth building even when the daily work feels ordinary. You're not just maintaining standards. You're building a foundation that becomes exponentially more valuable over time. Every year of sustained discipline makes the next year more powerful because you're building on an ever-growing base of experience, skill, and credibility. The people who build lives that last aren't more talented than those who flame out early. They're more patient. They're more consistent. They understand that the goal isn't to have the most impressive year. It's to have the most impressive life. And that life is built one disciplined day at a time, stretched across decades, until what once felt like effort becomes simply who you are. Chapter 9. The 30-Day Discipline Challenge. How your life will look different. 30 days doesn't sound long, but 30 days of real discipline will change you more than years of waiting for the perfect moment. This isn't about transformation through magic or luck. It's about what happens when you commit to showing up for yourself every single day for 1 month without negotiation, without excuses, without breaks. Most people have never given themselves 30 consecutive days of disciplined action because something always interrupts. A bad day, a social event, a feeling of tiredness, and they tell themselves they'll restart Monday. But you're not going to do that. For the next 30 days, you're going to follow through regardless of how you feel. And by the end, you won't recognize the person you've become. The first week will test your commitment. Your body won't be used to the new routine. Your mind will offer every reason to quit. You'll feel the pull of old habits trying to reclaim you. This is when most people fail because discipline hasn't become automatic yet. It still requires tremendous conscious effort. Every morning will feel like a battle. Every choice will require willpower. But if you can survive this first week without breaking your commitment, you'll prove something crucial to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. By the second week, something shifts. The routine starts feeling less foreign. Your body begins adapting to the new schedule. Your mind stops fighting quite as hard. You're not comfortable yet, but you're no longer in constant rebellion against yourself. This is when you start seeing the first tiny results. Maybe you have more energy. Maybe your focus sharpens slightly. Maybe you notice you're handling stress differently. These changes are small, but they're evidence that the work is paying off, and evidence builds momentum. The third week is where discipline becomes identity. You're past the novelty. The initial excitement has worn off completely. This is where you discover whether you built your discipline on motivation or on something deeper. If you make it through week 3 without quitting, you're no longer someone trying to be disciplined. You're becoming someone who is disciplined. The actions that felt forced in week 1 now feel like part of who you are. You're not pushing yourself as hard because the routine is starting to carry you. Week 4 is consolidation. By now, you've built enough consistency that missing a day feels wrong. Your new habits have created neural pathways strong enough that maintaining them requires less conscious effort than breaking them would. You start noticing changes others can see. Your energy is different. Your posture has shifted. The way you speak carries more weight. You're not the same person who started this journey 30 days ago, and the evidence is undeniable. What changes in 30 days of discipline extends far beyond the specific habits you've built. Your relationship with yourself fundamentally shifts. You've kept promises to yourself every day for a month. That creates a level of self-trust that changes everything. When you trust yourself, you stop second-guessing every decision. You stop needing external validation to move forward. You know that when you commit to something, you'll follow through because you have 30 days of proof. Your decision-making becomes faster and clearer. You've trained yourself to act without waiting for perfect conditions. You've learned to choose discipline over comfort so many times that the choice becomes automatic. When faced with options, you naturally gravitate toward what serves your long-term goals, rather than what feels good momentarily. This shift in decision-making compounds into better outcomes across every area of your life. Your tolerance for discomfort expands dramatically. Things that would have derailed you 30 days ago no longer have the same power. You've learned that discomfort is temporary, and that pushing through it builds strength. This increased tolerance means you can take on challenges that previously seemed impossible. You can have difficult conversations. You can pursue ambitious goals. You can face uncertainty without crumbling because you've built the mental resilience to handle whatever comes. The physical changes become visible. If your discipline included movement and nutrition, your body will reflect that. But even if your focus was on other areas, the simple act of maintaining discipline improves your physical presence. You carry yourself differently. You move with more purpose. Your energy becomes more stable throughout the day because you're no longer riding the roller coaster of inconsistent habits. Your relationships shift as your standards rise. When you respect yourself enough to maintain discipline, you naturally expect more from the people around you. You stop tolerating behavior that drains you. You set boundaries you previously avoided. You attract different people because you're operating at a different frequency. Some relationships will strengthen, others will fade. Both outcomes are evidence of growth. Perhaps most importantly, you develop unshakable evidence that change is possible. Before these 30 days, change was theoretical, something you believed in but hadn't proven. Now you have concrete proof. You've done the thing you said you'd do every single day for a month. That proof becomes the foundation for everything else you'll build, because once you know you can maintain discipline for 30 days, you know you can maintain it for 60, for 90, for the rest of your life. The life you have on day 30 won't be perfect. You won't have achieved all your goals, but you'll have something far more valuable. Momentum, clarity, and proof that you're the kind of person who follows through. That combination is more powerful than any single achievement, because it means you're no longer hoping for change. You're creating it systematically, one disciplined day at a time. 30 days from now, you can be exactly where you are right now. Still talking about what you'll do someday. Still waiting for the perfect moment. Or you can be someone completely different. Someone who proved to themselves that discipline isn't just something you wish for. It's something you build through consistent action. The choice is yours. The time is now. Conclusion: the life you're building. You've reached the end of this book, but this is not the end of your journey. This is the beginning. Everything you've read, every concept you've absorbed, every technique you've learned, all of it means nothing if you close this chapter and return to the life you had before. The question isn't whether you can build a disciplined life. You can. The question is whether you will. Right now, in this moment, you're standing at a crossroads. One path leads back to familiar patterns, to comfortable excuses, to the version of yourself that waits for tomorrow. The other path leads forward into the person you've always known you could become. The one who doesn't need perfect conditions, who doesn't wait for motivation, who simply decides and follows through. You know what needs to change. You've known it before you even started reading. The habits that drain you, the routines that keep you stuck, the commitments you've been breaking to yourself, all of it has been clear for longer than you want to admit. But awareness without action is just another form of procrastination. You don't need to know more. You need to do more. The life you're building isn't created in one dramatic moment. It's created in the quiet morning when you wake up 30 minutes earlier than you have to. It's created in the evening when you prepare for tomorrow instead of collapsing into distraction. It's created every time you choose the disciplined path, when the easy one is right there waiting. That life, the one you've been imagining, is built one decision at a time, repeated until those decisions become who you are. 30 days from now, you could be exactly where you are right now. Same habits, same excuses, same frustrations. Or you could be someone who's proven to themselves that discipline isn't just a concept, it's a practice. Someone who's kept every promise they made to themselves for an entire month. Someone who's built momentum that can't be stopped because it's rooted in action, not intention. The people you admire didn't get there by accident. They got there through the same unglamorous daily work you now understand. They faced the same resistance, the same doubt, the same moments of weakness. But they kept showing up anyway. They built their silence and calmness into steel. They turned their daily actions into unbreakable discipline. They became someone they could trust, and that trust became the foundation for everything else. You have that same capability. You always have. What you didn't have was the understanding that discipline isn't about force. It's about architecture. It's about building systems that carry you forward when willpower fades. It's about creating a life where the right choices are the easiest choices. It's about becoming someone who acts regardless of how they feel. This moment matters. Not the moment you finish reading these words, but the moment immediately after. What you do next will tell you everything you need to know about whether this was just information you consumed or transformation you're beginning. The work starts now, not tomorrow when you feel ready, not Monday when you can start fresh. Now, with whatever time remains in this day, with whatever energy you have left, with whatever circumstances currently surround you. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need to begin. Take one action that aligns with who you're becoming. Make your bed. Plan tomorrow. Move your body. Sit in silence for 5 minutes. Do one thing that proves to yourself that you meant what you felt while reading these chapters. Your future is waiting, but it's not waiting passively. It's being created actively by the choices you're making right now. Choose discipline. Choose silence. Choose calmness. Choose yourself. And when the voice in your head offers you the familiar comfort of delay, remember this. The life you want is not a gift someone will hand you. It's a build you must complete yourself, one disciplined day at a time. Begin now. The person you're becoming is watching.